Welcome to the Waiver Wire Show. We have made it through 10 NFL weeks. Week 11 is here. We're way past the halfway point. I don't know about you, Kevin, but this season is going way too fast for my liking. Brian McFadden, co-founder of Legit Football, here with my partner in crime, Kevin Phillip Fox. Kevin, I won't make you talk about the heartbreaking things that you may be going through right now. Let's talk some waivers.
That's why you're my king, Brian McFadden, because you understand emotions. I'm devastated. Everybody knows why. Let's help some people win some championships. How about that?
That's what we're here, because it makes us feel better. It mends the holes in our hearts if we help other people take home some trophies, and it all starts with your waivers. You think that at this point in the season, Kevin, waivers would be slim pickings, but I'm seeing some nice names here, right?
And we were talking before the show. There's a lot of weeks where it's like, oh, here's the one guy. Then there's tier break couple guys. There's really 15 to 20 guys right now that can change the course of your fantasy football season. So our list even today won't cover the entire, keep digging, keep doing your research. We'll throw in all the names at the honorable mentions portion, but this is the difference right here, Brian. These pickups are the difference between winning your championship and getting second place.
I mean, we've really only got a few weeks left until the fantasy playoffs. So yes, these are crucial. Yes, if you got Devin Achane who's coming back and you picked up Puka, those can be league winners, but how about the guys that are surging at the most important part of the season? So let's not make anybody wait too much longer. I already see a few questions in the chat, which is great because a lot of times we don't get questions for here, and they are waiver wire related. So we will address those if you have any questions. And for those that are listening, we don't say this enough. We're live on YouTube.
That's where you want to be.
And
that's
Facebook,
where you want to be.
Yep. So if you want to ask these questions before you actually do your waiver claims, just check us out. It's every Tuesday night at this time, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. Kev, should we go ahead and do our top 10 waivers?
Absolutely, sir. So ready. Born ready.
As we have been doing every single week I don't have a good excuse for it. We're switching up how we're doing the format. So we don't have a graphic. We're going to go through my list 1 through 10. I'll start popping them up one at a time, and then you'll let me know who you have for number one, comments on my number one, and we'll go through your list together.
Perfect.
And we will make this to the other side in one
piece.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and start with somebody I certainly never thought would be my a number one waiver wire pick. But just busted out. I just heard an ESPN.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything we need to break on?
College football. We're good.
All right. We're good for the no waivers for college.
No,
yet.
Sir.
How about some Devin Singletary?
Wow. Motor.
We're talking easily his best game at a former Bill. So here you go. Starting to make you feel a little bit better, right?
Yeah,
a former Bill seeing some success.
Yeah.
23.1 fantasy points if you're talking about full PPR in week 10. 30 carries, 150 yards. They gave him the ball, and it felt like every time he got the rock, he was getting a chunk gain. Scored a touchdown. Dameon Pierce injured, has missed the past 2 games. And by the way, he only has 48 fantasy points all season. So Devin Singletary nearly got half as many points in a single game. 150 yards, nearly twice as much as Pierce's best, which he had 81 back in week 5. And they face a really weak Arizona rush defense. This is a great week for a guy like Devin Singletary to be surging, to be available in 70% of fantasy leagues.
Yeah, he's a smash pickup and a smash start this week. I do have him in my top 4. The names I have ahead of him, I kind of think might have a little bit more. They're not as dependent on another player not stepping in. So nothing against Motor. I absolutely love him. I was devastated when he left Buffalo.
So let me give a little more context before I hear your number one. And here's why I put Singletary first. Dameon Pierce is not built for this style of run offense. So Bobby Slowick comes from the Shanahan tree. I actually didn't realize until a few weeks ago that not only is he from Shanahan, he was with Shanahan back in Houston. He's like OG, like LaFleur, McVay, McDaniel days. He goes way back. They're really big on zone run scheme. They're really big on guys who have quick burst, speed, and one cut type running backs. And none of those things are Dameon Pierce. He's a very physical runner, bruiser between the tackles, great short yardage guy. And I'm wondering if the reason we haven't seen success from Pierce is he's just not the right running back for this system. Get a guy like Singletary, give him enough usage and see what happens. So I'm kind of wondering if Singletary doesn't finish out the season as RB1 in Houston.
Yeah, and Singletary has experience being in a high-flying offense. That's something that Singletary was excelled at in Buffalo. He was always an adequate receiving back, third down back, fine in pass protection. But when you, like you mentioned, when you need somebody to go in there and get the, 3 or 4 yards, make a guy miss, he's not a downhill runner by any stretch, but he does pack a punch. He's a little guy, but he packs a punch. So I love this pickup at number 1, and I love the smash play of him against Arizona. It'll be Pierce's first game back. I think they'll probably ease Pierce in, and then we'll see what happens. I'm with you on that. Singletary does have rest of season value regardless. I do get a little nervous about Pierce.
It's a little bit of prediction on my part. I predict that Singletary will just be much more effective in this Bobby Slowick Houston Texans offense as he has been, that they'll just keep riding him. And Pierce will get some short yardage stuff like there, but Singletary will be the lead back. That's my prediction anyway.
I don't disagree with you at all. My number 1 pickup is a little dicey, and I'm just going to throw his name out there. I'm sure he's on your list. I don't know where. But I feel like this guy could, until Kyren Williams comes back, be the RB1 in LA, and I'm looking at Darrell Henderson.
He is not on my list at all.
Not on your list in the top 10. I really like Darrell Henderson this week. I think he's interesting.
I can't have a running back that was on the streets and not even willing to be signed by his former team until they had no other choice at all.
I get it. Injured. I totally get it. Like, I was a little out of order this week, but I do have him in my number 1 spot just because the opportunity. Stafford's coming back this week. It's a smash play. I think he could have a good game. But there you go. Already some variance in our lists. That's what we love to see on this. Who's your number 2?
I don't even have Henderson on my list.
I love it. It's bonus pickup number 1. There you go.
By the way, quick shout out. Normally during the Waiver Wire show, we're not really addressing the chat. That's for the Fantasy Q&A show. But Oscar Nava, regular, said he just had another baby. So I'm going to say congrats to you, Oscar. Going to put you up here. Taking a quick break. We see you, Joe. We see you, Armand. Everybody else in the chat. But I had to stop and give our boy Oscar some congrats.
Welcome. Got to give some love to Oscar. We're gonna answer Joe's question at the end, and I'm gonna give Armand a knuckle sandwich for his smack talk at the end.
All right. So while I bring up my number 2, if you want to go ahead and Kevin star the questions that have already come in, so
yeah, sure. I'll throw them in this. I'll throw them in the stars if you want to start on your number 2.
Fantastic. All right. So pulling up number 2. We're going to see a little theme with these first few and yours as well, and of what position that round out the top of these. And this is a guy who popped up on our list last week, only got a few touches, but he made the absolute most of every single one of those. And that is Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah.
So he got great game, 100 yards last week. You thought they would give him a lot of touches. No, they gave him 4. What did he do with those 4 touches? Oh, only 66 yards, averaging 4.3 yards per carry. 14.3 yards per carry over the last 2 weeks, and a touchdown. So give the freaking guy the ball more. I mean, it's hashtag analysis right here. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, absolutely. And Keaton Mitchell's my number 2. He's a great pickup this week as well. So definitely smash that one, and could have rest of season value as well, given that Justice Hill hasn't been hard to supplant whatsoever. And Gus Edwards plays a very different role than Keaton Mitchell. Yeah. Keaton Mitchell, I actually believe we talked about it last week. I mentioned the Achane comparison. Did we not see that, or what? Did that not jump out?
It's like Achane Jr., which is crazy because they're both rookies. It's not like Achane's been in the league, but he's giving similar vibes, which means
very similar.
They need to do in Baltimore what Miami did and give him more opportunities, because every time he touches the ball, it's lightning. So why would you not see what you have there? And they ended up losing the game. I'm not saying that's the reason, but like, get your stars to football.
It's weird. It's a weird move. They kind of did deserve to lose that game. Hopefully they'll learn their lesson and give Keaton Mitchell more looks next week.
All right. So we are aligned here. We both had number 2. So let's go ahead and jump on to number 3. Sticking with running backs. How about some Ty Chandler in Minnesota? 44% of the running back snaps in week 10 versus Atlanta. And he looked, not surprisingly, so much more explosive than Alexander Mattison. He got 15 carries, did score. I was sneaky high on the Cam Akers pickup because I'm just not high on Madison. And unfortunately, Akers tore his other Achilles, likely career ending. Enter Ty Chandler, who had a pretty good preseason, second year back. And he just looks like a more explosive fit on an offense that is actually explosive itself, even with Josh Dobbs running it. I'm all on Ty Chandler. I have him in our Dynasty League. I don't know if you know that I had him stashed there. So glad to see that he's seeing some pop.
Yeah, Ty Chandler, great player, great talent, great opportunity. Who's in his way, Brian? Middleton?
Nope.
Come on.
Nope.
Ty Chandler is going to get out there. He's going to get his looks. He's got Josh Dobbs, who, like you said, is way more competent than we thought. He was on my list last week. I think he should probably be on our lists until he doesn't qualify anymore. He's a wonderful, wonderful player. Great story. A+ social media troller. Absolutely love the Ty Chandler signing. That's a no-brainer. He's number 5 on my list. Again, only because the names between here and there are guys that I think different positions, but I think can solidify a position rest of the season.
Let's hear it. Let's hear number 3 for you.
Well, number 3 for me, I got Pop Douglas. You keep making that. You've been doing it every week, and he keeps going out there.
Who's throwing him the football? No, he's getting targets, but we are seeing his ceiling. We are literally seeing his ceiling because he's got either Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi throwing him the ball. I said it last week, Kev. It's not the talent. I actually really like Douglas's talent.
He's so good.
If they get a rookie quarterback next year for Dynasty, yes, you should be stashing him if you don't already have him. Trade for him if you can. This year, come on. Did you see that Germany game?
They
were willing to bench suck. Mac Jones with like 2 minutes left just because they were tired of seeing what he could do with that offense.
No, they're awful. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, but he is just such a stud, and he's a slot like PPR machine. I love players like that. If it's PPR, he's got to be higher than 10. You'll give me that, right?
Of the guys I have on this list, no, I would take the rest of these over him.
No worries.
Because he's getting the volume, but he's not getting yardage. So there is a floor. I will say that. So I'll go ahead and pull up the stats I have for Douglas, even though I have him at 10. So he's averaging over 7 targets a game over the last 4 games. Last game, 6 receptions on 9 targets for 84 yards versus Indy. Yet to get in the end zone during those games. So he's getting the volume. There's not a lot of other options in New England, but he still plays for the Patriots, and whoever's throwing him the ball is just his ceiling is capped. We are literally looking at his ceiling, and that's the problem I have. So a lot of these other guys, the ceiling is a lot higher.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I totally respect that. Brian, why don't you give me number 4 on your list?
You're going to be very happy with this number 4. You were high on this guy. You tried to trade him to me, and I said no. Noah Brown.
Love him.
Here's the thing. You do it 2 weeks in a row. You can't ignore it anymore. Let's look at some of his stats from last week. Wide receiver 3 2 weeks ago. Wide receiver 6 last week. 13 receptions on 14 targets for 325 yards and a touchdown in just 2 games. But here's the thing. Here's why I put him all the way up at number 4 instead of just like a back end stash with upside. So Nico Collins has a calf injury, and he regressed in practice last week. He actually started off as a limited participant and then didn't practice in the last couple practice for the end of the week. That tells me that this is an injury that is serious and could lead to 1 or 2 more absences. And we have seen what Noah Brown can do in this high-flying Texans offense. By the way, notice I put 2 Texans on my top 4 already.
How can you not?
But Tank Dell is phenomenal, and he's been off this list for a while. And I struck gold. I got him on all my leagues. But Noah Brown, honestly, has really stepped up and is the clear number 2 when Nico Collins is out. Rest of season, little bit scared. If Collins comes back, Collins has had a fantastic year as well. You still got some other mouths to feed, but definitely ahead of Robert Woods. Like, to me, it's Tank Dell and Noah Brown until Collins comes back.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. And you just feel the trust, right? CJ Stroud just has so much trust in Noah Brown. I've gotten used to watching CJ Stroud drop back, scramble around, and then dart it down the field, and just he's there. 85 is there.
Yep.
And so it's something that I love to see as a Noah Brown dynasty owner. And it's something that I love to see, being a guy who's been high on him for a long time. Definitely a victory lap for me. He's on my list.
I would have won my matchup in our dynasty league had I traded for Noah Brown.
I tried to tell you, and Dodson goosed, and you were begging me for Dodson.
You're right. I'm glad I didn't get Dodson, but it would have been nice to have Noah Brown.
I did it as a favor to you.
Okay, thank you.
The other name on my list that you haven't mentioned, and he's in my 4, is Pat Freiermuth. I think Pat Freiermuth
thought about him.
Could be a league-winning tight end. He's coming back from IR. He's dipped below 40% even. I think he's around 36, 35%. Not a lot of people had the luxury of being able to stash Freiermuth, but the tight end position is, as we know, barren. A little less barren this year than previous years. I will give you that. There's some guys, Hawkinson, Kelsey, Goddard's had some flashes. There's
Mark
some guys.
Andrews, Sam Laporta, Kincaid's coming on now.
There's some exciting stuff happening at the position, but Freiermuth has been sort of, I would love to say a stalwart, but this is his second year. But he's a really, really good player, and I think he can win you a league if you are struggling at the position. If you've been throwing in your Logan Thomases and your Luke Musgraves, no offense, and your Hunter Henrys, you can finally lock down that position, I think, with Pat Freiermuth. By the way,
don't smear Logan Thomas. Thomas has been solid week in.
He's been on our list several times. He's in the ultimate tight end streamer.
I didn't even see him on the list. I don't think he qualifies. Yeah, I didn't see
maybe
him
not this.
The list I came from.
Maybe not anymore.
So I did consider Freiermuth, and I totally get your reasons.
That's another one that we're different on. That's two.
Yeah, a couple of reasons I didn't include him in my list at all is I want to see how he looks coming off that injury. It was serious enough for him to go on injured reserve. I have very little faith in the Steelers offense and Kenny Pickett in general. Now that the other tight end I'm going to mention later, the offense also sucks. So but we're seeing some consistency. In other words, I want to see it for another week. Hey, this is waivers. If you want to take a shot on a guy like Pat Freiermuth, it's better off doing that now than when he gets more expensive. I get that. 100%. But that was my consideration when I get to my tight end in a few picks. It's because I've seen it a little bit more recently. And there's a nice floor there.
I can totally respect that.
Let's move on to a guy who I'm pretty sure has been on our list every single week this year, but he still stays under the threshold. That is Mr. Tyjae Spears.
I love him.
As long as he qualifies, he's going to be on there. We've had him number one for a number of weeks. He's not worthy of number one yet.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Because now Henry's still there. We've kind of seen the ceiling for Spears. Love him in Dynasty because I do think he takes over this job next year. A few stats from him. He got 60% of the running back snaps last week. That is the highest. He's been out snapping Derrick Henry consistently, but he never hit the 60s. Now he got 60%. And he's starting to really, he's always had some good games in the past game, but the last two games really involving him since Will Levis took over. 8 receptions on 11 targets in the last two games. So especially in PPR, that's a guy you can count on. Actually had, I think, his best fantasy output. It was only like 10 points, minus that one game where he scored earlier in the week. And that was mainly due to the fact that he's getting opportunities in the pass game. So Tyjae Spears, he's still out there in most of your leagues.
Yeah.
Why not?
I'd love to call this the Tyjae Spears show, man. He's just been there all year. And it's kind of weird because we're kind of forecasting a little bit with the need to have him rostered, right? Like, especially now, injuries abounding, playoffs right around the corner. You cannot afford to hold the bag if you run out of running backs. I'm staring down starting Antonio Gibson in the face in one of my leagues, and I don't really feel great about it. So if I had stashed a player like Tyjae, I wouldn't be in that position, right? Even though, admittedly, we're hoping, not necessarily hoping, but we're kind of forecasting some growth.
I will say Spears has a floor. It's not a high floor, but it's a floor. It's not zero. Yeah. It's not some of these other running backs where you just don't, like Justice Hill. If you've been stashing him, he got less than a point, I think, this past week. And the reason we have him all the way down to 5 is Singletary, Mitchell, Chandler. Those are guys who could legitimately be RB1s. Tyjae Spears is not going to be an RB1 in Tennessee as long as Derrick Henry is still healthy.
If you had to throw one into your lineup just for thought experiment's sake, would you throw Tyjae Spears in or Gibson? Gibson has some pass catching.
I kind of like Gibson only because of the offense that he plays in.
Yeah.
We saw how the running backs could succeed, both Brian Robinson and Gibson this past week with Sam Howell in Washington. So that's what I'm going on. I think their opportunities are pretty similar. And when opportunities are equal, I'm going to go with the more exciting offense in Washington.
Definitely. I respect that. I'm just curious. Thought experiment. All right, Brian, who you got at number 6?
Number 6, sticking with the run. I'm just got a lot of running backs on here, and I believe we've had him on our show. I think we even had him last week. Zach Charbonnet, just like a lot of these other rookies, finally seeing more opportunities. He actually had his best fantasy output, 10.2 PPR points, but still, that was due to 4 receptions on 5 targets. And guess what? He outsnapped Kenneth Walker again. That is the 3rd straight week of outsnapping him. And this is a guy that is showing the ability to produce. He has averaged 7 yards per carry in those 3 games. This isn't a guy who's getting his opportunities and not doing anything with them. He is getting better each week. They used him extensively in the pass game this past week against that Washington team. And I think that's showing that they're only going to give him more. They're going to give him more snaps. They're going to give him more opportunities. Just like Tyjae, as long as Kenneth Walker is there, his his touches are going to be limited, but I like the talent, and it seems like Pete Carroll really likes him, and he's giving him more opportunities each week.
That's what I was going to mention is the trust. I mean, that's very clearly there. And the Seahawks are such an enigma, man. Will the real Seahawks please stand up? We're waiting to find out what that team is, who they are, what their identity is. And I think Charbonnet, I think when those situations happen, what's the Game of Thrones quote? Chaos is a ladder. So if there's a lot of turmoil and we don't know who's this, that, and the third, I mean, Walker hasn't really been the problem, but it doesn't really feel like they have much of an identity. So Charbonnet could probably have an opportunity to usurp some touches just based off the fact that they're trying to switch things up a little bit. So I love the pickup. I do think he was on last week's episode as well.
Yeah, I believe so as well. Do you have a number 6? Is it
my number 6 is Jaden Reed. And we've also talked about him a million times on the show.
Considered it.
And that's another fresh name. We're absolutely dominating the widespread picks this week. But
I think that's due to how many interesting names were on the waiver wire.
Like I said, 20 to 25 names that I looked at that could have been in my top 10.
This has got to be the most divergent we've been all season.
100%. And and it's refreshing. Like I said, I think that's because the fantasy forecast is just so wide. Like there's so much going on now, and everybody's fighting to make the playoff spot. But you can't make the playoffs, or you can't win in the playoffs without making the playoffs. So a guy like Jaden Reed, who is actually scoring points right now, caught a touchdown this past week, has been earning the trust of the coaching staff, of the quarterback. Christian Watson.
And speaking of that quarterback, there's I know that some people out there, our friend Rich can't stand Jordan Love,
hates him.
But he actually looked pretty good. This is one of his best games of the season. I thought if he can keep that up, guys like Jaden Reed are only going to benefit.
I actually thought about Jordan Love for this list as well. I don't know if he's on yours, but I saw he was starting to qualify again.
He did. I didn't put a quarterback on here, but
me neither. If I did, it would be him or Stafford, just for reference to the people who need QBs.
I could see Stafford having a good week. They're playing a rival in Seattle, coming off the bye.
Go put a 2-pack bid in for Henderson and Stafford and prosper.
So number 7 is an interesting one. This is a guy that, if I recall correctly, showed up on our list earlier in the season. A ton of off-season hype. It's a guy that he started to blow up in New York. Things went sour. Traded him to Cleveland. All sorts of off-season hype, and it never materialized until maybe we're finally starting to see it. That's right. That's Elijah Moore. Best game as a Brown, easily finally got in the end zone as his first touchdown since he's been in Cleveland. 15.4 fantasy points, 5 receptions on 7 targets for 44 yards. So he's not going to be a big yardage guy, but you mentioned PPR. And if he's going to get more red zone targets like he did this game, and more importantly, that was probably Deshaun Watson's best game overall as a Brown, especially the second half, coming back and beating the Baltimore Ravens team on the road. So I put in my notes, Elijah Moore goes as Watson goes. If Watson starts playing better, we know Moore has got the talent. This could be a good spot to pick up a guy like Elijah Moore. And if it blossoms right in time for the fantasy championship, good on you.
Yeah, no, I love the call. Kept him off my list. You'll see some of the names that I have towards the end. Again, it's high
so many differences.
It's just one of those weeks where there's it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's almost like we did this on purpose. But we didn't.
We really don't. We don't
peeling back the curtain. We did not do this on purpose. So definitely love the pickup. And my number 7, it kind of pairs nicely with yours because it's almost the exact opposite. You have the 5 for 44 and 1 guy, the safe, very likely will get you, 7 to 10 points. I have Rashid Shaheed, who's just consistently going to be either 4 points or 23 points. And there's really no in between. And I've always liked the talent.
Kind of like him with Jameis playing quarterback. That's the kind of receiver that's going to benefit from a Jameis Winston.
How beautiful would that be? Are we locked in? Is Jameis officially going to be what's Carr's prognosis? Do we have
They
updates?
haven't made it official yet. He's definitely questionable. He doesn't have an official designation yet, but the talk coming out is he's got multiple injuries. There was a shoulder injury. There was
he's been banged up all year. He's been getting rocked. But I think Shaheed with Jameis is, that's the nitrous, that's the volatility that you want to inject into your lineup. So just to pair it with your sort of your PPR, your safe guy,
your vegetables, and then
there you go.
Get a giant chocolate bar, which is bad for you a lot of the time, and sometimes it tastes amazing.
That's what I'm talking about. So Shaheed, I gotta throw him a bone there at number 7.
Let's go ahead and get to the one tight end. I referenced him earlier, talking about bad offenses. I get it. I am no fan of Zach Wilson. However, you have to look at the stats here. Tyler Conklin, he's come up on our list a few times this year.
Yeah.
So, but last 2 games, 13 receptions on 13 targets, for 136 yards. He was the tight end 5 in week 10, Kevin. This is really eating your vegetables. This is looking at the stats, looking past the name and saying, this is a guy, especially if you play in like a tight end premium league or any type of PPR scenario where Zach Wilson's essentially looking to Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin, and then Breece Hall if those guys are covered. It's pretty straightforward. They're funneling and they're going to be playing from behind. I don't love the offense. There's a reason he's number 8. There's a lot of good tight ends out there. You probably don't need a guy like Conklin, but if you do, and Freiermuth, I get. I just like it's steady production. It's steady production. He's getting 6 or 7 targets a game as a tight end. I'll take that.
Yeah, far from sexy, but definitely reliable. We talked about tight end streamers earlier in the episode. I talked about maybe going out and taking a swing at a guy like Freiermuth coming back from injury, so you don't have to play a guy like Conklin. But if you're gonna, dance with the devil, then Conklin is the one that you wanna. He's the one you want to have be your dancing partner. So, yeah, I like the pickup. It's your vegetables for sure. It's unseasoned broccoli without garlic butter and no ranch to dip it in, uncooked. It's raw broccoli.
Raw.
My number 8 pickup is a running back, and they are a fall in the end zone candidate. And I'm looking at a guy who went, I want to say something along the lines of like 9 for 70 something last week. Latavius Murray. He's definitely going to be a change of pace back. He's the hammer he's the thunder to James Cook's lightning.
Scored in Denver.
Scored a touchdown. Had nice yards per carry. Called the players only meeting. His leadership is huge. Fournette hasn't been active yet, so I don't think he's much of a threat to Murray's role. Harris is still on IR, no sign of coming back. So I think this RB2 in Buffalo role, which hopefully becomes more valuable with Ken Dorsey's firing, pour one out for the former Miami Hurricanes QB. But I really like Latavius Murray as a break glass in case of emergency, throw in your flex if you have a guy who gets injured and it pops up on the injury report Sunday morning,
And they really like using him in the red zone over James Cook. So
100%.
Anytime you have that, you're going to have more touchdown upside. So I like that as well. Let's go ahead and get through our last couple. Number 9, this is another guy that had a ton of hype coming into the season. A guy who has excelled on multiple teams with multiple 1,000-yard seasons, and he finally put it together. Granted, it was against a very bad Giants defense. How about a little Brandon Cooks love making the waiver wire? An absolute monster game. That whole team had a monster game except Tony Pollard, strangely enough. 9 receptions on 10 targets, 173 yards, and a touchdown. He was actually one of the top fantasy performers, period. I think he was number 3 or 4 for the entire week 10 slate. 32.3 points in PPR. But we have to say it did come against a New York Giants very, very bad all-around team. Forget just the secondary. And he has a tough matchup next week against Carolina, who is horrible against the run. So we could see a nice Pollard game coming up. But still, had to put Cooks in here. We know the talent. We've seen the ceiling now. He had to at least make the top 10 for me.
Oh yeah, and I love the pick at number 9. My number 9 is different, but it's exciting that we have so many names. Cooks absolutely crossed my mind to get thrown in here. I only worry about consistency and reliability. Dak is out there just doing the old sprinkler, man. He's throwing the ball to everybody. CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Jake Ferguson. We saw a fantasy relevant game.
They're not running the ball well, which is like, I know he's spreading it around, but if he's going to throw it 40 to 50 times, that means there's a lot of.
You said they, and by they you mean Pollard, because Rico Dowdle was 12 for 78 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
So
Dowdle is Pollard this year. Pollard is Zeke last year.
They both crossed my mind. They both, I almost put Dowdle.
I almost put Dowdle on this list.
It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. I'm nauseous thinking about Tony Pollard in this season, but Cooks, he definitely can sneak in there and get some of that work. My number 9 is a guy who I think qualifies for this list as far as all my research goes. But since you don't have him on your list, I'm questioning that. But I have Trey McBride at number 9. Wasn't sure if he was under the percentage threshold, but unbelievable
Actually,
game.
Yeah, he didn't come up in my research, so maybe he's not. But if he is available in your league, that's a smash.
He should be ahead of them youth. I only had him as low because I wasn't sure if he qualified, but love Trey McBride. Definitely like a check to see if people are asleep at the wheel there, because Kyler coming back feels like Kyler's going to unlock some of that Trey McBride potential. And then
the Cardinals had their first 100-yard receiver since like the 80s or something crazy.
And I don't know if you saw the prayer that Kyler threw up, that
tight end, the 100 plus tight end, 100 plus yard tight end.
The prayer that Kyler threw up to McBride when he went and got it, I was like, wow, that's special. That chemistry, that trust.
Did you hear why that play happened?
No, I didn't hear.
So McBride told Kyler, hey, this guy's I've been cooking him one-on-one all day. If he gives me one-on-one, just chuck it up and I'll get it. He told Kyler to do that.
That's dope. That's what happened. So got to go out there and check on Trey McBride. It's lower on my list because the likelihood is probably low that you'll be able to at this point. But my number 10 was Tyjae, and we already talked about him. So Brian, your number 10 is the last name we're going to talk about.
No, we already talked about him. I told you. I got Demario at number 10. Demario Pop Douglas. I'm gonna put my whole list on the bottom, but I do have one honorable mention. Kev, do you have any what you want to throw out real quick before we get to questions?
I think based on the fact that we've talked about 17 names, my honorable mentions are they were on your list, so we're good over here.
Good, because I have one it's not anybody. This is a pure speculation flyer pick, a guy I really liked in the draft who finally got to see some action and finally got in the end zone, and that is A.T. Perry.
Nice.
Was a huge fan of his coming out of Wake Forest. Dynasty 100%. If he's not on your team, I also have him in I have in multiple Dynasty leagues. I believed in this guy coming out. He's been a healthy and active for most of the games this year. Look, there's a lot of playmakers in New Orleans, but we saw what he could do. He went up and absolutely snatched that touchdown. He did have 3 catches for, I think, like 40 yards, but he did have that amazing contested catch touchdown. I think we're going to see more of that. If we got Jameis and then he's chucking it up, yeah, you could do worse than putting a guy like A.T. Perry on your bench if you have the space for it. All right, let's go ahead and get to some of the questions that came in. Starting with Joe Holland said, Luke Musgrave is all the questions are Joe Holland. By the way, Kev, monitor the chat, see if anybody else have questions.
Yes, sir.
Waiver wire only. If you have fantasy questions, come around Thursday at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific for our fantasy Q&A show. I should be on it this week for those that
we're praying.
I don't always make it.
We need you because Demon just keeps picking on Josh Allen, man. We need you to moderate.
Well, this is not going to be a good week for that then. If that's the case.
I'm showing up in disguise. I can't show my face on that show.
All right, Luke Musgrave or Pat Fryermuth. You kind of already answered this.
That's Kevin. A Pat. That's a Pat pretty easily. Yeah. If you need to start this week because Muth is banged up and coming back, maybe Musgrave just for safety, but I like Pat.
I have liked what I've seen from Musgrave lately. He's finally starting to flash, but we know what Fryermuth could be. He was the tight end 8 last year. Don't get cute. Go with Musgrave. Holland with a defensive streamer question. Texans D or Broncos D?
And we looked at the matchups here. The Broncos play the Vikings, which has been a bad matchup for Cardinals. So, and that's easier when it's not Kyler. Kyler kind of throws a little bit of a wrench in that. I might look for what's behind door number 3 because I don't really like either of those plays this week.
Here, normally I would agree with you, but the Broncos have now shut down the Chiefs and the Bills. This is a Broncos defense that is not the same team that led up 70 points to Miami earlier in the season. They're playing extremely well. I kind of like Broncos against the Vikings. Now, I'm a Josh Dobbs fan. I want to see the Vikings keep winning. But if these are your only 2 choices, and if we're forced to choose between these 2, I'm going to go with Denver here.
Yeah, I think just for fun, I'll say you could probably see if the Commanders D is available. They're playing the Giants. They've been, kind of burnt down. They've been kind of deemed as cooked. The Chargers D, they've been susceptible all year, but they're playing the Packers. Don't really have a ton of faith in the Packers. And then if you have any faith in the Browns offense, the Steelers D could be interesting because they play the Browns this week. I don't personally.
There's a possibility. Watson got injured towards the end of that game. I've seen some things that maybe Watson doesn't play. If that's the case, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, something to look at.
Could be a great play. I don't know what this means, but you start it.
Oh, I wanted to throw a shout out. That's Papa Holland. That's Joey Craig's dad. So happy birthday, Thomas Holland. Hopefully Joe gets his guys for your birthday.
Happy birthday to Papa Holland. All right.
Hell yeah.
And then would you add Rodgers to stash? Aaron Rodgers says he's coming back mid-December. No?
I don't think so. I mean, worst case,
I guess by that fantasy is going to be gone by that point. If tell you what, if in Dynasty he's sitting around, he says he's going to come back and play another year, stash him. But in redraft, I don't think you even get a chance to use him, even if he does come back
mid-December. What takes us to what? Let me look at the week.
That's 4 more weeks. So that's like right at the playoffs.
Yeah.
But if you made the playoffs, chances are you're going to have a better quarterback option than Rodgers.
Are you going to throw a guy fresh off a torn Achilles in your lineup? I don't know. It's to quote Brian McFadden from earlier today, don't get cute. Dance with the girl who brought you.
And that sounds like a perfect way to end the show. Thank you so much. Next week, it will be just Kevin. I will be in Mexico.
Hey, have fun.
During the week of Thanksgiving. So Kevin will be on Waiver Wire Show. I will try my best to be on Fantasy Q&A this Thursday, but obviously I will be gone next week as well.
And send your proxy list for me.
Will do. I will. Yeah. I'll try my best to send it from international overseas. Or did you cross the sea to go to Mexico? I guess not. Anyway,
you'll be right down the street from me if you want to just pull up and
I'll just drop it off.
Catch up.
Yeah, nice. Will do. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. Reminder: we're here every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. I hope that we have helped some of you make some really nice waiver claims. We've seen some of our recommendations hit pretty well. Few also missed, but that's how it goes. Kevin, any last words before we wrap up going into week 11?
Go Joe Brady. Thanks for watching.
There you go. Thanks, guys. Make sure to stay tuned Thursday, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific for the Fantasy Q&A show.